So this year we're taking a look at biology, and biology is the study of life or living things. So before we get into more biology, we have to figure out what makes something alive. There are 8 characteristics that all living things have in common. If you're looking at something and it's missing even one of the 8 characteristics, then we don't say that it's a living thing. It's not an organism. We call it a non-living thing. And non-living things are different from things that are dead. If something's dead, that means it was once living, it once had all these 8 characteristics, but a non-living thing means it's not alive, it was never alive, because it was missing one or many of the 8 characteristics. So let's take a look at the 8 characteristics that all living things have in common. So the first characteristic that we're going to take a look at is that all living things have DNA. And DNA is just molecules inside of organisms, so inside of you or plants or other animals and even bacteria that give information about their traits. It gives information also about how the bodies of those organisms will work. The second thing that living things have in common is that all living things are made up of one or more than one cell. So there are organisms that their whole entire body is just one cell. So here are 3 different types of organisms where all of their bodies is just one cell. We call that unicellular. So these organisms are unicellular. But there are other organisms like humans that have many different types of cells that make up their body. So here we have for humans stem cells, bone cells, blood cells, muscle cells, and so on. We call organisms whose bodies are made up of many cells, we call them multicellular organisms. Now the thing about each cell is that's where the DNA is inside of. The third characteristic of living things is that all living things reproduce. Now there's 2 types of ways that living things reproduce. One is through sexual reproduction. That means the sex cells, the egg and the sperm, they come from 2 different parents and then they join to make the new organism or the new offspring. So a lot of animals reproduce in this way. There's egg from one parent and the sperm from the other parent, and then they join. The other type of reproduction is asexual reproduction. In this case, only one parent is needed, and basically that one parent makes a copy of itself, and that's how the new organism is made. And bacteria and other organisms, these are some examples of how they kind of just make a copy of themselves. They don't need another partner to help them reproduce. They just need themselves. So the next characteristic of living things is that they grow and develop. So here's an example of a human, from a baby all the way to a child, a teenager, all the way to an adult. Okay, same thing happens with bacteria. Same thing happens with plants. The 5th characteristic is living things respond to their environment. So what does that mean? That means if something is going on around us or around the living thing, they're going to react to it. An example of this would be with plants and caterpillars. Now, certain plants, they'll make these chemicals that taste bad so that when the caterpillar tries to eat the leaves of the plant, it doesn't taste very good. So then that will cause the caterpillar to not go to that plant anymore. So this is an example of how organisms can respond to their environment. The 6th characteristic of living things is that living things maintain something called homeostasis, which just means a balance. Now, our bodies have to be at a balance because if it's not at a balance, then it's not going to work properly. So an example of when we have to keep our bodies, or living things have to keep their bodies in a homeostasis or a balance is, for example, with temperature. Our internal temperature is going to be around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Now at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, that means it's a good temperature for our bodies to work the way it should be. If it's too high or too low, then our bodies don't work properly. So let's say that we're in the middle of summer and we're in the middle of a heat wave and it's 104 degrees Fahrenheit outside. If we go outside, we don't want to overheat. We don't want to have a temperature higher than 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit because then our bodies won't work properly. So what does our body do so that we maintain that balance? We maintain that homeostasis that internal temperature of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, well, our bodies will sweat. And when we sweat, it helps to cool us off so we don't overheat. Well, what if it's in the winter time and it's, let's say, 20 degrees Fahrenheit outside? If we have to maintain homeostasis by keeping our temperature at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, we don't want it to drop too low because then our bodies won't work properly. So what does our body do in order to maintain that temperature and not drop? We shiver. And when we shiver, we generate heat. The next characteristic that all living things have is that we have to get and use material and energy so that we can survive, so that we can grow and develop and reproduce. So what does that mean? For instance, for animals, we need food so that we can have enough energy to go ahead and do whatever we need to do. So food would be like a type of material, and in our food there's energy. Well, what about like plants? Plants don't normally eat other organisms, but they still need to get energy and they still need to get materials. So one way they do that, instead of eating something else, they actually make their food in their bodies. And they need materials like carbon dioxide, they need water, and they need energy from the sun in order to make their food inside their bodies. The last thing that all living things do is that they evolve. And when I say evolve, I'm not saying like one organism, let's say one human, will evolve. When I say evolution or evolve, I'm talking about groups of organisms. And when I say evolve, that means they're changing over a really, really long period of time. Okay, so I'm not talking about like one human changing from a baby to an adult. I'm saying all the humans, and they're changing over many, many, many millions of years. Okay, or many, many, many generations. So let's take a look at an example here. Here are beetles, and some were born with that black color, and some were born with the brown color for their bodies. Now, who is at an advantage in this background? Well, the ones that are brown colored for their bodies, they're at an advantage because they can blend in with the environment. So they can hide from the predators, the birds that are trying to eat them. The ones that have the black body color, some of them might survive, but most likely they're going to be seen really quickly by the birds, so they'll be picked and eaten much more faster than the ones that have the brown body color. So what's going to happen? Well, the ones that have the brown body color, the ones that survive, they're going to pass on that trait to their kids. And then their kids are going to survive and then pass on that brown body color trait to their kids, and so on. The ones that have the black body, like I said, some of them will die, but maybe a few of them will survive. So if a few of them survive, they will pass on that black body color to their kids, and so on. What will happen after a few years or many, many generations? Well, after a while, you'll see a change in the population. So that means that more of these beetles will be born with the brown body color, and there won't be as many beetles that have the black body color. So you can see the difference here was in that first generation or first year, and after many, many years or many generations, okay, you'll see more of the brown body color because it gives them an advantage and they're born with that, then they got that trait from the parents, compared to the black body color. So these are the 8 characteristics of living things. Remember, in order to be considered alive or living, you need to have all 8 characteristics. If you're missing even one, that thing that you're looking at is not alive, it is a non-living thing.